I want to start off today with a question. How many of you have ever had a fever, a runny nose, strep throat, or any other physical illness? How common is it for you to stay home from work, school, or cancel plans because you feel like everyday minuscule tasks are unbearable? Pretty common, right? Now, how many of you have ever had depression, anxiety, or a personality disorder? It is just as common to stay home from school, work, or to cancel those same plans because these illnesses make it feel impossible to live a normal life. Why is it that people are judged and viewed as inferior when they suffer from a mental illness as opposed to a physical one? Well, I'm here today to offer a solution to this problem, a change in tides, if you will, and to share my experiences with mental illness. When I was a young girl, my family spent our summers at our small beach condo right off the shore of Ocean City, Maryland. My favorite memories were not the sunny days. Rather, they were what came after, when the sun began to set behind us, when I walked out to the beach, one hand grasping my little pink fishing pole and another grasping my father's. We would plant my dad's tattered blue beach chair right on the shoreline and let the waves of low tide crash over our feet. However, as the sun sank further, the tide began to come in. Without a single nibble on the line, my dad's mood began to shift. He would slam his beach chair shut, reel in the lines, and silently walk back to the condo. It was barely dusk, and he would pull his shutters closed, lock his door, and lay in bed with a bottle for the rest of the night. I would ask my mother what was wrong, and she would reply with the jaded, "Daddy isn't feeling well again." As the daughter of a father impacted by mental illness, I have personally experienced the judgment and humiliation that accompanies it. And I am not alone. Not only is it vital for children in this situation to feel support and validation, but it is equally vital for those who stigmatize mental illness to understand the pain they have inflicted. These children raised by parents who are struggling with mental health issues often hide their familial realities, resulting in shame and denial. Licensed counselor Stacey Overton and family therapist Sandra Medina explain that those that suffer from a mental illness are stigmatized, marginalized, disadvantaged, discriminated against, and vulnerable. They are seen as flawed outcasts because they don't fit the ideal identity of society. Now, what are the effects of this stigmatization, these stereotypes, these prejudices? Mentally ill people begin to judge themselves, causing isolation, feelings of inferiority, self-hate, and shame. This creates a continuous cycle of judgment and labeling, which forces them to deny their conditions and internalize their emotions. I was a victim of this cycle. I bottled up my emotions until it felt like I was going to explode, and my feelings of shame and loneliness poured out into endless streams of tears. If we continue to allow families impacted by mental illness to isolate themselves, then the villains known as self-hate, shame, and denial will continue to affect the minds of these people and their children. Personally, I've felt the effects of the stigma at a very young age. I was embarrassed to have my friends stay at my house. I was ashamed of the way my father acted, so I denied his condition and hid from reality. It chased me around every corner like a game of hide and go seek, but I always found another nook to crawl into, another bed to hide under, or another closet to lock myself in order to escape its grasp. Such stigmas have detrimental effects for parents and their children. According to the World Health Organization, 30% of adults diagnosed with a mental health disorder have a child under the age of 18. These children are susceptible to issues regarding their own mental health, communication skills, and educational status. Labeling, stigma, and inappropriate community feedback also decrease children's self-esteem significantly. Not to mention, Doctor of Medicine Natasha Marston mentions that genetically, these children are 2 and 3 times more likely to develop a mental health problem of their own. The combination of these risk factors and the treatment by community causes children to feel hopeless about their current environment and their future. Since they are scientifically more likely to develop a mental illness, it is vital that actions are taken to aid with this process. In my family, bipolar depression and alcoholism are the most prevalent mental illnesses. They have been passed on from 3 generations of men, and my brother has experienced the symptoms of depression since he turned 15. Marston also states that people with depression frequently overestimate stigmatized views held by others, which acts as a deterrent to help-seeking behaviors. My brother is now 19, and he has just now reached out to my family for help. He thought we would be angry that he inherited the gene, so he hid his emotions. Parental mental illness has implications for how the family functions as a whole. However, because of our awareness, we recognize that heredity is out of his control, and we continue to help him on his mental health journey. Another example is a 17-year-old peer of mine has a mother with multiple personality disorder. She's been aware of this from a young age and knows what signs and symptoms to look for in herself. However, she tends to prevent interaction between her friends and her mother because she's afraid they'll see the other side of her. She's heard the many whispers behind her back calling her mom crazy or a psychopath. She described that she constantly feels lost and is always worried about what her friends would think of her family. Because of this perpetual worry, she has been clinically diagnosed with anxiety. These stigmas behind mental disorders have caused mental illness to continue from parent to child, and society must become more compassionate and accepting of mental illness in order to make a change. So, how do we make this change? We must equate physical health to mental health. Parents and society need to work together to integrate mental health into the education of young children in school and promote awareness and prevent the negative impacts that accompany it. Researchers argue that education may be too limited to reduce resilient, stigmatizing attitudes because belief systems are so well ingrained. But we have the power to break this cycle. Starting this education at a young age will instead shape their belief systems, promote acceptance, and eliminate further stigma. Often, children are underestimated in their abilities to process new information and treated as a societal norm. As a child that was kept in the dark, I wish I would have known this information at a young age. I looked up to my father, and when I finally found out about his illness as a teenager, I felt betrayed and lied to. Little girls should not have to wonder why their fathers are not coming home for dinner that night because they're at the bar. Little girls should not have to wonder why their dad's words are always slurred and why he seems to always be angry. Little girls should not be afraid when they hear their father's footsteps storming up the stairs, wondering if he's in one of his moods. Little girls should not feel ashamed of their fathers. Ultimately, children are the main solution. If they are taught in school and by parents that mental illness such as depression is no different than physical illness such as the flu, then they'll be more accepting of it and recognize that it's out of a person's control and they can't help how it impacts them. However, when researching the difference in funding between physical health and mental health, I was not able to find results from the United States. Other countries are recognizing that mental health is extremely underfunded, and they are trying to make a change. The lack of research in the United States indicates the need for research. It is vital for America to publish funding information in order to manage it better. Increased funding of mental health and equating it on an educational and economic level will help those impacted by it realize that they are important, that they do matter. So, let's go back to the initial question. You know how it feels to be knocked down from a physical illness, but do you really know how it feels to be knocked down from a mental one? If you don't, you're lucky. You most likely haven't felt the isolation that mentally ill people feel every day. However, if you have, you know how unbearable life can seem. I encourage you, regardless of whether you've dealt with a mental illness or not, to change the tides and approach mental illness in a different way. Although I may not be sure of the overall solution to the problem, I am sure that, as the daughter of someone struggling with mental illness and addiction, I know how damaging stigma can be to children, families, and the function of society as a whole. If parents cooperate to properly educate children about mental health, then they can evoke a positive change. They can eliminate the stigma. They can eliminate the isolation. They can eliminate the shame, low self-esteem, and feelings of inferiority that impact these families. Children will no longer feel humiliated and judged. To any child struggling with mental illness in your family, don't let your situation define you. You have the power to turn those negatives into positives and to promote compassion. You are the answer. Help become the difference. Help to make the change. One day, I hope to bring my children back to that small beach condo. I want to walk them out to the shoreline, one hand grasping mine and another grasping their grandfather's. They will wade out into the warm, low tide water of August and watch as the pale pink sky fades into the night. As they sit on their grandfather's lap, they will look at him with the same big, innocent eyes that I had as a young girl. The only difference, however, is they will be educated and understanding of his condition. So, when the tide begins to change, they will recognize his change in mood, but they will no longer hide from their familiar realities, resulting in acceptance and compassion towards those struggling with mental illness.